NYU professor Thomas Cooley argues that we should not only recover bailout costs that we've incurred, we should also create an ongoing charge for insuring against risky behavior. Now, what you've described is a way to pay back the taxpayer for the TARP funds that would have the effect of discouraging risky behavior. But why don't we consider both a ex post fee, which is what you've proposed, to recover TARP outlays, and also a so-called ex ante levy to deter risk-taking at the expense of taxpayers going forward?
There are a lot of proponents of a so-called ex ante fund financed by a levy on financial institutions as a fund that would go to cover the future costs of bailouts. As you know, Senator, the risk in doing that is it does create the perception that the government might undertake future bailouts. And that perception could undermine the efforts we're undertaking to reduce moral hazard in the system, make it more stable, make it less likely that investors and executives make decisions in the future on the expectation the government's going to come in and save them from their mistakes. So there are many proponents of an ex ante fund, but I think the disadvantage in doing it that way is, again, it may create an impression, however designed, that there is a pool of money there to help fund future bailouts, and that, some people have argued, could add to moral hazard rather than reduce it. So that's the argument against.
Well, that would assume that the money, this ex ante levy, be put in a fund, which would be specifically for this purpose. You could take the fee you're talking about as a way to pay back the TARP funds and still add to that another fee which would go to the government so that the government would be more capable of doing whatever it had to do in the future, whether it was dealing with an oil spill or dealing with a hurricane or whatever problems the government encounters down the road. So
you're exactly right, and you're exactly right, and that is the general proposal is, since there may be crises in the future that cost money, puts money aside today, paid for by banks, to help cover those uncertain future costs. And there are a lot of proponents of that approach too. Again, we're trying to meet the narrow legal requirement in the law to cover the TARP costs, but I understand the merits of that broader approach. I guess the risk in it, just to do both sides of it, is that frankly, that money could get spent on other programs that wouldn't be there to actually protect the government from future financial crisis costs. That would be the risk in doing a...
But it could go to reduce the deficit, just as Senator Grassley was asking you what this would be intended to do. You say this is intended, the fee you're now proposing is intended to reduce the deficit. There's no reason why we're all in favor of reducing the deficit. We can reduce it even more if we have more of a fee, right?
That's exactly right. Again, we're trying to meet the narrow requirement in the law to cover the direct TARP costs, but we recognize, of course, that doesn't fully capture the cost of this crisis, and of course doesn't try to capture the cost of future crisis.